we go. And get started with some general introductions and such. So first, I want to, while we're waiting for other folks to join us, I want to welcome everyone to the event. So Discover the Power of Plants for weight loss for the new year, and actually for life, because we say that using a healthy diet, as Dr. Davis is going to be describing for us and discussing, it's not a fad, it's not a gimmick, it's not a trick or a tip. This is really what Dr. Davis will be describing. Is really a lifestyle, a diet that really it's very long term, it's sustainable, and so it's not just, you know, quick weight loss, but really that can help us keep all of us healthy and thriving for our lives. So that's the point I wanted to make. So once again, my name is Harriet Emerson, and I'm in Salt Lake City, and I help lead a community group called Salt Lake Thrive. And Thrive is all about helping people be aware of the many, many benefits of a plant-rich diet for certainly our health, which Dr. Davis will be discussing, but also for the planet, and certainly helping to create a more compassionate world for millions of animals. Salt Lake Thrive has been up and running for about 2.5 years now. We were doing monthly in-person events. Remember those days we could get together. Hopefully we'll be back to that later this year. So now with COVID, of course, we have transitioned to online meetings. So on one hand, we certainly miss the opportunity to meet in person, but the other hand, it certainly allows us to reach many more people. We certainly, especially posting events on Eventbrite, we've had the opportunity to have international audiences. So as I mentioned, Thrive, we have typically events almost every month. And next month, February, it's Heart Health Month. And in observance of that, we're going to have a couple events. We're planning a couple events. We are on Tuesday, February 9th. We are going to have a cooking demo.
I did.
I'll ask everybody to mute yours. Thank you.
Yep.
Mute yourself.
I got the boxes shipped and the check deposited.
And I'll ask everybody to mute yourselves. We may have a questions opportunity to ask questions later. Thank you. So anyway, as I mentioned, coming up on Tuesday, February 9th, we're going to have a cooking demo, and recognizing that a lot of people are choosing not to go out to restaurants or don't have the opportunity at this point in time, we're going to have Sharon Bates, who's with us tonight, is going to do a cooking demo for a heart-healthy, romantic Valentine's Day dinner. And so that'll be, Sharon's done a few cooking demos for us, and they've just always been fabulous, and she gets lots of compliments, as she should. And they're hoping later in the month of February to have a cardiologist, a plant-based cardiologist, to talk about how a plant-based nutrition and other lifestyle factors as well for heart health. So, so with us tonight, our presenter tonight is Dr. Niki Davis. Dr. Davis has done a presentation. This is her second time with us, and we're so happy to have her back. She did a presentation, a fabulous presentation in October, on how to help prevent and manage breast cancer with a plant-rich diet and other lifestyle factors. So Dr. Davis, she's homegrown. She was from Salt Lake, and she went to University of Utah Medical School. She went to Montana, and we're very happy that she came back to Salt Lake. And she will provide a little bit more information about her background. But and as you'll see from her presentation, she just really has a passion for helping people just, you know, not only a longer life, but just a better quality of life through health and nutrition. And she has worked with some very prominent plant-based doctors, such as Dr. John McDougall and Alan Goldhammer. And she will be planning on doing retreats and providing other services as well, which I'm sure she'll give you more information on. So without further ado, we will go ahead, and I'll turn over to Dr. Niki Davis for her discussion on how to discover the power plants for weight loss and for the rest of your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet, so much. All right, well, I'm very excited to be here. And let me just see if I can share my screen here and pull up my slides. All right. Harriet, is that pulling up for you?
It is.
Looks good. Yeah,
Great.
looks good, Nikki.
All right. So as Harriet mentioned, we wanted to get together today to talk about the power of plants, and specifically we wanted to talk about weight loss. And the reason that we decided to talk about this month is because it tends to be about the time that a lot of people want to make resolutions and make some goals that they want to achieve for the year. It's also a month called Veganuary, where a lot of people are changing their diet to a vegan diet or a plant-based diet. And it's becoming more and more well-known, a plant-based diet, and more popular. So I think that there are a lot of people out there who are possibly interested or have heard of it, but just want to know more information about what it is and why it makes sense to do it. And specifically, there are a lot of people out there that are looking for a way to manage their weight and not fall into that vicious cycle of dieting. So that's what we wanted to talk about today, was helping people make that transition to eating more plants and how that can help with weight loss, not only for your New Year's resolution, but also just like Harriet said, for life. So let's see if I can get this to move forward. Perfect. All right. So a little bit about me. Harriet already mentioned it a little bit, and it looks like my screen is washing me out a little bit here, so let's see if that helps. So I, like she said, was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. In the 90s and the 2000s, I did my undergrad and master's degree in mechanical engineering. So long ways off from medicine. But I was good at math and science, and that's what I thought that I wanted to do at the time. I actually had thought about doing medicine, but thought it would take too long. And of course, now I'm in a second career, and it did take a while, but if you never start, you're never going to finish, right? So I worked as a mechanical engineer and a systems engineer for a company called ATK Launch Systems. It's now owned by Orbital, but I worked as quote unquote rocket scientist. So I worked on the space shuttle program before that was dismantled. And then I decided to just quit my job one day because I knew that I wasn't passionate about engineering. And instead I knew that what I was passionate about was health, and especially eating plant-based. So I've been plant-based in one form or another since I was 13 years old. So it was something that I've always been very passionate about. And I was talking to my husband, and he said, you know, you'd be a really good doctor. You should really think about that. And at the time I thought, there's no way that I'm going back to school. I've done enough schooling. But that just started the idea of what I could possibly do with a medical degree and helping people live healthier lives. So in 2013, I started at the University of Utah School of Medicine and graduated in 2017. While I was a medical student, I was lucky enough to work with Dr. John McDougall during one of his 10-day live-in programs, where I got to see firsthand the benefits of patients making a change to a plant-based diet and how that benefited their health. So not only was I seeing people with diabetes getting off medications, people with high blood pressure getting off medications, people losing weight, people's arthritis getting better. And this is only in 10 days, but also as a medical student, he allowed us to get our own blood work drawn. And in 7 days between blood work draws, my bad cholesterol, my LDL cholesterol, dropped 20 points. And that's just going from a regular vegan diet, which I thought was pretty healthy, to a more whole food, plant-based, oil-free diet. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Once I graduated medical school, I moved to Montana with my family and did a family medicine residency, and just graduated from that in June of this year. So I'm just fresh out of residency, but with a lot of passion for what I'm doing. Luckily, right before graduating, I had a chance to intern at the True North Health Center as well, and that's where I got to work with Dr. Alan Goldhammer and get mentored by Dr. Clapper as well. So that was an amazing experience. And now I am board certified in family medicine, but also I am an international diplomat in lifestyle medicine, which some of you may be familiar with, some of you maybe not. So that's where I'm going to start, is teaching you a little bit about lifestyle medicine and why that's something that I'm also passionate about. So what is lifestyle medicine? So lifestyle medicine was started as the American College of Lifestyle Medicine in 2004. And they transitioned that, or expanded that, I should say, to the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine in 2015, and then the International Board of Lifestyle Medicine in 2016. So what lifestyle medicine tries to do is they use evidence-based therapeutic approaches to treat, reverse, and prevent lifestyle-related chronic disease. So this is a health-focused approach. We're looking at trying to help people either prevent getting the disease to begin with, or if they have a disease, to either arrest or reverse, if possible, that disease through lifestyle changes. Now that's in contrast to conventional medicine, which is focused on mostly medications and surgical interventions, where the provider themselves is more responsible for the patient, making sure that they're getting the correct medications, where the patient is more passive. Now with lifestyle medicine, the patient has to be a more active role and really be following through with some of these goals instead of just taking a pill. So lifestyle medicine has 6 pillars. And the first one is a whole food plant-based diet, which is mainly what we're going to be talking about today. Some of the other things that they have as far as their pillars go is physical activity, also known as exercise, stress management, emotional wellness, getting enough sleep, the avoidance of risky substances and tobacco use, and then also not only positive psychology, but social connectedness and being able to have relationships. So these are what they found to be the important focuses of having a healthy lifestyle. So like I mentioned, today what I wanted to talk about was the first pillar, which is eating a predominantly whole food plant-based diet. And today specifically what we're going to cover is how that type of a diet can help with weight loss and weight management. So these are the things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about, first of all, what is a healthy goal weight? We're going to talk about obesity in America, what that's looking like right now. We'll discuss the low carb and keto craze, because I know that a lot of people are probably familiar with this. They've probably had friends and family who've been interested in eating low carb. They've probably even had doctors tell them to eat low carb. We're going to talk about plant-based diets that have been put to the test, so some of the research that's been done, some of the studies. And then we'll talk about, what do you eat? So when we're talking about a whole food plant-based diet, what does that mean? What does that look like? We're going to go over something called calorie density, nutrient density, and then also we'll discuss oils. The other thing that we're going to talk about is, how do you even get started? So once you know what to do, how do you kind of get rolling and get started in this way of eating? And then we'll talk about a few other factors you want to keep in mind. We won't go into too much detail, but things like intermittent fasting, talking about physical activity and about how much you want to get, and then sedentary behavior. And sedentary behavior is one of those things that I think has increased more with COVID and a lot of people being at home more often. To finish it off, we're going to talk about making SMART goals. Some of you may have heard of that. And then finally, we'll finish off with how to make plans in case you've made this change and you have a lapse. Basically, you eat something that you didn't want to eat, or a relapse, which is you've completely given it up and you're going back to your old way of eating. So we will talk about that as well. So first of all, a healthy goal weight, and I'm just going to ask everyone, if you aren't muted already, to please mute yourself. Got a little bit of background noise. But a healthy goal weight, so I'm sure some of you have heard of a BMI. So a BMI looks at what a healthy weight might be, and you're looking at that compared to what your height is. So a BMI is not perfect, but for most of us, it'll give us an idea of where we want to be in the healthy range of weight. So it's not going to be really great for short people or people who have really high muscle mass. But overall, for the general public, a healthy BMI is somewhere between 18.5 and 24.9. Now, what we have found is that the lowest risk for developing morbidities, so some diseases, is somewhere between 19 and 22. So although a normal BMI would be 24.9, you really want to be more on the lower end of the scale if possible. Overweight is you're considered overweight if your BMI is 25 to 29.9, and then obesity is over 30. So that's just to give you an idea of where you want to be as far as BMI. And then we want to talk about what are your healthy weight loss goals. So you really want to manage your expectations of weight loss. So for instance, maybe your dream is to be in that healthy goal, healthy range, which would be a 24.9, would be at the very top of the normal range. But you might want to step back and think, well, where would I actually be happy? Would I be happy at a 27? And maybe it's acceptable if I get below 30. And I would be disappointed if I stayed over a BMI of 30. So really looking at where is your dream, but where would you feel that you'd be acceptable? And then the other thing is looking at how much weight do you want to lose? So a lot of people say, well, gosh, I've got 50 pounds to lose. Well, that's great if that is going to help you get to your goal weight. But when you start out, you want to start out with something that's a little bit more acceptable. So for instance, maybe 5 to 10% of your initial body weight. So if you're starting out at say 200 pounds, maybe you want to look at an initial of 10 to 20 pound weight loss. Now, why do we care about being overweight and obese? Well, of course we care. Of course, we want to feel and look our best, but in addition to that, just being overweight and just being obese can increase your risk of many diseases. High blood pressure, heart disease, certain types of cancers like colon cancer, high cholesterol, diabetes, and the list goes on and on. So there's a very good reason to be in the normal weight range for not only wanting to feel and look your best, but also for your future health. Now, obesity in America, unfortunately, we're going the wrong direction. I'm sure a lot of you know this, but until you actually see the numbers, it's pretty staggering. So I did a talk similar to this in 2017, and our obese percentage was 36%. And when I went to prepare for this, I looked, and today it's at 42%. So in 3 years, we've already gone up 6%. It's amazing. And we're thinking now that by the year 2030, that we're going to be up to 50%. And we're getting there. We're getting to where it's nearly 1 in every 2 adults. And this isn't just being overweight. This is obese. So this is over a BMI of 30. So what's happening? Why does this continue to happen? And why is it getting worse? So I think that it has to do with what I like to call the SAD diet, the standard American diet. So the standard American diet is laden with meat products, cheese products, oil, junk food, processed foods. So in my professional opinion, I think that a lot of it has to do with the increased consumption of meat, dairy, and oil. And that usually comes in with junk foods, but it can also come with a lot of other types of foods too. So not only has meat intake been steadily increasing since the 1940s, but cheese intake has also been steadily increasing. So in that same period of time since the 1940s, cheese intake has increased tenfold. So it used to be that people would eat about 3 or 4 pounds of cheese a year. Now we're up to over 30 pounds of cheese per year, per person. That's 60,000 calories of cheese per year. So let's go into talking about the low carb and keto diets, because I know that that's something that a lot of people wonder about, if that's something that can be healthy, if that's a good way to lose weight. And I'll tell you this, that it is not something that I recommend at all. And here are the reasons why. So a low carb diet or a keto diet is meant to put you in what's called ketosis. So that is something that your body has adapted to be able to do in a response to low glucose. So your primary fuel in your body is glucose. So when you don't have enough, your body has the ability to make ketones, which they use. Your body uses fatty acids out of your adipose or fat tissue to make these ketones. And the reason that it makes these is because your brain needs glucose for energy. And your brain is the most important thing that your brain or that your body wants to fuel for energy. And so when it does not have the glucose it needs, it transitions over to using ketones for that energy for your brain. Now this is great. Back before we had food readily available all of the time, 24/7, we went for periods without eating. So when you are starving, this is something that is necessary to be able to survive. So it's great. It's great that we can do this. What it does is it makes you fatigued. It causes nausea. It causes loss of appetite. It also causes reduced hunger pains. And the reason for this is because when you are starving, your body doesn't want to keep sending you these hunger signals over and over and over again, because it'll just make you miserable. So instead, it causes you to lay low, sleep, and try to reduce the energy that you're expending. And what happens with that is that you actually end up reducing your calorie intake too. So with people who are going into ketosis on purpose, they might not feel great and they are going to eat less. And this does equate to some rapid weight loss. So that is why people are losing weight. Now, this is used for some disease processes. So for instance, it has been found that epilepsy can be treated with this type of a diet. Now, the rapid weight loss that I was talking about is mainly due to initially water loss. So ketones actually act as a diuretic, which can cause you to lose a large amount of water instead of what you would hope, which is fat loss. The other thing that you're going to lose is your glycogen stores. So your muscles and your liver both store what's known as glycogen, which is a long chain of glucose. It has those in store for when they need it, for when something like this happens. Well, you can store on average about 3 pounds of glycogen in your body. So when you go into starvation mode, your body is first of all going to use the glycogen because its primary wanted source of fuel is glucose. So it's going to use those up first before it starts making those ketones. So you're going to lose weight because your body is getting rid of all the glycogen that it has stored in the body. Now, the problem with the low carb and keto diets is that they typically are high in meat, high in fat, high in cholesterol, high in protein, and low in fiber. And all of these equate to just not feeling well. And one of the things that a lot of people deal with, especially on a keto diet, is constipation. Now, the other thing that's been found in the literature is that when you are on a diet like this, you tend to have your LDL, your bad cholesterol, increase, and your HDL, which is considered your good cholesterol, decrease. So this is not a good thing. So when you do eat glucose in your diet, which is found from carbohydrates, so carbohydrates that you eat, which is found in all plants, when you eat too many carbohydrates, so basically more than what you can expend with your energy, that is, as we spoke about before, stored as glycogen. So that's stored in your muscles and your liver. Those excess sugars are not typically stored as fat. So if you do have anything extra that isn't stored as glycogen, you are going to burn it off as heat. Now, there is a way that your body can turn sugar into fat, and it's called de novo lipogenesis. This is something that some animals are able to do efficiently, something that cows actually can do. Now, they are herbivores, and they are pretty hefty, and that is something that they can do pretty well. For us as humans, it's just not something that we do well. We're not very efficient at turning sugar into fat. So the metabolic cost is that 30% of the calories that you consume have to be used in transitioning those sugars into fats. So you're wasting 30% of the energy that you could have used for your body. Now, you can contrast that with you're transferring your dietary fat to storage in adipose tissue. So basically you're eating fat and it goes and it's stored as fat into your body. That only takes 3% of the calories you consume. So that is very simple. So if you eat excess fat more than what you are using up as energy, it immediately gets stored into your body fat stores very easily because it doesn't take much of a metabolic demand to do that. So I hope I've convinced you that going low carb or doing a keto type diet is not the best way to lose weight. So is there a better way? Well, let's talk about plant-based diets. So I apologize, some of the titles have been covered, but plant-based diets have been put to the test over many years. So we have a lot of great data. And one of the studies that was done, this was done in the early 2000s, is a fabulous study because it looked at a huge number of participants. And these are the Adventists out of California. So it's a religious group where part of their religious doctrine is to eat a vegetarian diet. Now, not all of them eat a completely vegan diet, and not all of them are vegetarian. Some of them do eat meat. So it's actually a nice way to see a group of like-minded people who happen to have different ways of following what their religious doctrine says. So what they did was they looked at a 4-year span of people that were over 30 years old, and they looked at what their BMI was. They just looked to see, for what you eat, what is your BMI? And what they found was that BMI dropped as people ate fewer animal products. So if you were not vegetarian, if you ate meat and dairy products and eggs, your BMI on average was about 28, which would be in the overweight category. And as you go down the list, so semi-vegetarian was eating maybe a little bit of meat here and there. Pesco-vegetarian, you're eating fish, but you're not eating beef or poultry. And then lacto-ovo, you're not eating any meat at all, but you are still using dairy products and eggs. Then your BMI goes down further. And then the lowest BMI was found to be in the people who ate a completely vegan diet, so a plant-based diet, where they did not have any animal products at all. Another couple of studies that I wanted to mention. So one of them is the National Institute of Health study that was done in 2015. This one was really interesting. So this is one where they took 10 men and 9 women, and the people were an average age of about 35. They had an average BMI of 36, so that would be in the obese category. They did not have diabetes. And what they did was they put them into a research facility where they lived for 24/7 for 2 weeks at a time. So they put them in the situation where they would live in a place in this research facility for 2 weeks. They would give them about 2 to 4 weeks off to go home, and then they would have them come back for another 2 weeks. So 2 2-week spans. What they did was they randomized them as to what they would do for the first 2 weeks or the last 2 weeks. So the first 2 weeks, for half of the people, would be that they would start them with 5 days of eating a more well-rounded diet. So it would be a balanced diet where they would have, let's see, I've got it written down. So they had 50% carbohydrates, 35% fat, and 15% protein. It ended up being about 2,700 calories per day. And that matched their energy expenditure for the day. So that was for the first 5 days that they gave them that. For the following 6 days, they would either have them decrease their calories by 30% in the way of decreasing their fat or their carbohydrate. So both groups got to decrease their calories by 30%, but one group decreased it by using fat only, and the other one was carbohydrate only. And what's really interesting is what they did was, if you were one of the groups that was on the more low-fat diet in the first 2 weeks that you were there, when you came back, they would put you on the low-carbohydrate diet. So they were able to actually compare for each person how doing these different diets affected the person individually. So what they found was that the people who ate the low carbohydrate diet did lose weight, about 53 grams of body fat per day, and that those who ate the low fat diet lost 89 grams of body fat per day. So they lost 68% more when the same percentage of calories was decreased. So they ate the same amount of calories, but instead of decreasing carbohydrate, they decreased fat. So this was a great study that showed us that by decreasing calories, using fat versus carbohydrate, you end up losing more weight. The other study I want to talk about is called the Veterans Administration Study. So if some of you are familiar with Dr. John McDougall, he often will say the fat you eat is the fat you wear. And I just had mentioned that your body very easily can take the fat from your diet and store it onto your body with not much effort. So this was really put to the test, and one of the first research studies that was done that showed that what you eat is what you wear was this study. And so what they did was they took participants from the Veterans Administration home in Los Angeles, and what they did was they said, for half of the participants, they said, we want you to eat mostly fat from animal products, and the other half, they said, we want you to eat mostly fat from plant products. And every 4 months, they would take a small needle and take fat out of their behinds, and they would look at it and analyze it. And what they found was that the people who were eating animal fats tended to have animal type fats stored on their body. They also found that people who ate more plant food fats, that they had more plant type fats on their body. So for instance, if people would eat more margarine or shortening, which is high in trans fats, that is the type of fat that they would find when they analyzed their fat storage was more trans fats. If someone ate a lot of fish, they would find both saturated fats and the omega-3 fats. So it really matched what was in the diet, matched what was on someone, what they would wear on their body. So this was a really interesting study that showed that that is actually quite accurate, that what you eat is what you wear as far as fat is concerned. Now they did that for 5 years, and it continued to remain true for those 5 years. There were a series of studies also done that looked at satiety. So satiety is how food makes you feel full. So do you feel satisfied? Do you feel full? So the research done that compared the impact of eating carbohydrates and fats on the appeasement of appetite showed that carbohydrates led to long-term satiety, enduring for hours between meals, whereas those who ate fats in their meal had little impact on satiety. So it goes to show that people who are eating more fats and oils are left wanting more after the meal. So you're just not getting that satiety from your meal when you're eating too much fat. This is a study that was actually done based on the McDougall program. So John McDougall, this was, so what I mentioned earlier, how I was part of one of his 10-day programs, this is based on his 10-day program. So he looked at the effect of people eating for 7 days a low-fat vegan diet, plant-based diet, and this was an all-you-can-eat buffet. And I know this because I was there and I ate that food, and it was so delicious. The fat content was less than 10% of calories came from fat. It was quite high in carbohydrates. He teaches that you should really base your meals around starch, and so about 80% of the calories actually came from carbohydrates or starches. It's pretty moderate in sodium, and like I said, an all-you-can-eat buffet style, so people could go back for seconds, thirds, fourths, as much as you wanted to eat. The median weight loss over that time in 7 days was 3 pounds. So it just goes to show that it doesn't necessarily matter how much you're eating, but it really matters what you have on your plate. I'm going to ask everyone again, if you could please mute yourself if you are not muted. So what do you eat? So when you're eating a plant-based diet and you're looking at specifically wanting weight loss, what should you be eating? So the main things that you're going to want to be eating are starchy vegetables. That would be corn, potatoes. You also want to be eating grains like rice, barley, quinoa, and legumes. So peas, lentils, beans. And then you also want to have non-starchy vegetables. So broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, tomatoes, and then fruits. So all the fruits you can imagine. These are the main things you want to focus on. And when you're looking at that, if any of you have heard of calorie density, that is something that looks at, it measures the amount of calories in a given weight of food. So with how big and heavy some piece of food is, how many calories is in that? So it's expressed in calories per pound. This is something that was from Forks Over Knives, but it just basically gives you an idea of what 500 calories looks like in different food types. So if you look at what we were just talking about with oil, oil takes up very little space in your stomach. It does not stretch those nerve receptors that you have in your stomach that tell you when you're full. However, if you look at the last two on the right, you've got potatoes, rice, beans, vegetables. They are very low in calories, but high in how much girth you have in the amount of food that you're eating. So your stretch receptors in your stomach are going to sense that, and you're going to get full faster with the same amount of calories. So you can fill your stomach with a bunch of vegetables or a very small amount of oil. Now, I don't think that you should just eat vegetables. That's not going to keep you happy or full. You've got to also have those important starches, the grains, and those are really what's going to help you feel satisfied and happy. So this just gives you a little bit of an idea of, when you're looking at calorie density, how many calories are there per pound in typical food items. So for instance, like we just talked about, vegetables that are non-starchy are going to be about 100 calories per pound. And that's in contrast with, at the very bottom, 4,000 calories per pound for oils. What you want to try to focus on is staying above the green line. So vegetables, fruits, starchy vegetables, potato, corn, squash, oats, whole grains, rices, even pastas that are whole grains, beans and legumes. And then avoid or limit the ones that are below the red line. Now, avocados are right there kind of in the middle. And so that's a whole food. And I think that it's okay to have that. But if you're really looking at weight loss, maybe just limiting it and not having an entire avocado a day can help with weight loss. Meats and higher fat animal foods are found below the red line as well. So let's talk a little bit more about oils, since now we know that you get a whopping 4,000 calories per pound with oils. Now, a lot of people think that oil in some forms is healthy. So I know that when I was growing up, I thought that olive oil was healthy, that it was heart healthy. That's what they are always saying. So oils, what I'm talking about is not only pure oil, so like olive oil or canola oil, but also butters and margarines, lard, things like that. They're all types of oils. Olive oil, corn oil, coconut oil, flax oil, hemp seed oil. They are all highly processed. So you have to take a lot of the particular type of food and strip away the fat out of it to get a small amount of oil. So it's very highly processed. Oils are also 100% pure liquid fat. 100% of the calories in oil comes from fat. It is the most calorie dense food on the planet. Now, saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, such as in olive oil, has actually been found to be harmful to the endothelium of your arteries. coconut oil, which has been touted as a health food, is over 90% saturated fat. It acts just like if you were eating butter or lard on your arteries. It's very detrimental to that lining of your arteries called the endothelium. And oil is pretty much devoid of nutrients. It might have like some vitamin E or vitamin K in there, but not very much. It's definitely, you don't get any bang for your buck. You've got a lot of calories and not enough nutrients. Now, one thing that has been found in studies is that it does reduce blood flow mediated dilation. So when you have increased blood flow through your arteries are meant to be able to dilate to allow that blood flow. So what they found is that after a fatty meal, that dilation does not work as well, and it goes down by 30% over 4 hours after having a fatty meal. It also, oil has been found to suppress the immune system, and the immune system is important. It makes you more vulnerable to infections and cancer when your immune system isn't functioning properly. It also contributes to insulin resistance. So this is something that I won't go into today, but inside your fat cells, you store fat, or I'm sorry, inside your muscle cells, you store fat. So it's called intramyocellular lipids. And that fat can get in the way of insulin being able to do its job, which is basically to unlock the door of your cell and let glucose into the cell for energy. So I wanted to show you a video about what I'm talking about here. All right, so this video is showing normal blood flow before a meal. So this is on an animal study in mice, and it's showing the actual red blood cells flowing through the body, through the arteries before eating a meal. So it goes in, it's going through there very quickly. And this is showing what it looks like after these animals, the mice, were given a very fatty meal. And you can see very easily how the blood is just having a hard time getting through those capillaries. So this is a capillary. This is the smallest artery in your body, showing how slowly your blood is moving through. And this takes over 10 hours for it to get back to normal, to where it's flowing at a normal rate through the body. Oh, and I lost my spot here. Oh, there we go. So that just shows how, oh, sorry, I've got some music going here. Hang on.
That video was pretty impressive, Dr. Davis.
Right? It's pretty amazing. All right, so I'm going to see if I can stop this from continuing. There we go. All right. So like I mentioned, a lot of people think, well, gosh, olive oil is supposed to be healthy. And, but actually it's composed of mostly monounsaturated fats, which are not essential. And essential, what that means is that it must come from our diet, since our cells cannot produce this type of a fat. So none of what olive oil contains is essential. What your body does need from the diet are omega-3s and omega-6s, because these contribute to brain function. And the need for these fats is actually quite small. Only about 1 to 3% of your caloric intake needs to be these fats. And to be honest, essential fatty acid deficiency is essentially non-existent in the general population. So when you are eating plants, they all contain fat in some level or another, and you are getting plenty. You don't need to eat excess fat in the way of oil. And this just tells you a little bit about, so if you wanted to try to get your daily omega-3 from olive oil, you would have to drink 1 cup of olive oil a day. And by doing that, you'd have to eat 1,900 calories and 30 grams of fat with that comes with that olive oil. So omega-3s, maybe would be better served by having maybe 1 or 2 tablespoons of flax seeds. Now, some people will say, well, gosh, olive oil has polyphenols. So this is antioxidants that are found in olive oil, but also are found in whole plant foods. Now, a whole plant food actually has more nutrients, fewer calories, and less fat than oils. So it makes more sense that if you want to get polyphenols as an antioxidant, you just eat the whole plant food instead of eating the very high fat oil. So this just shows that in 4 lettuce leaves, you can get the same amount of polyphenols than you can in a tablespoon of olive oil, and the difference in the calories is tenfold. But how do you get rid of oil in your diet? So the first thing is you've got to get it out of your house. Second thing, you can cook without oil. It is possible. So one of the first things that I did when I got rid of oil was I invested in really good nonstick pots and pans. That's key. You've got to find good nonstick pots and pans. So the pans that we use in our family are called scan pans. I do have a link on my website to those if that's something that you are interested in trying to get. The other thing you can do is use vegetable broth for sauteing. And for baking, a lot of the times I just use applesauce and it works just as well. The other thing that I like to use is air frying. So I have an air fryer that I use to crisp things up without using oil. Now, oil is found in a lot of restaurants, so you have to be really wary of when you eat out. Let's say that you've decided, I want to go vegan, I want to go plant-based. Oh, great, there's this plant-based restaurant right down the street. Well, chances are they use a lot of oil. Unfortunately, a lot of these restaurants are not as health conscious as you'd like. So a lot of places, though, you can get steamed rice or steamed veggies with rice. One of the things that my husband uses, and I've heard Chef AJ uses, my doctor told me that I have to be 100% oil-free, so there's no chance I can have even a drop. And if you tell them that they'll be a little bit more understanding when you ask to have your meal prepared without oil. I also put a list here on some places where you can find oil-free recipes. So for instance, Brand New Vegan has a lot of great oil-free recipes. Kathy Fisher, she has a book called Straight Up Food that has some great oil-free recipes. There are lots of them out there. So this is a good one that you can take a screenshot or just look at later if you want to look at some of these. Nutrient density. So we talked about calorie density, but what is nutrient density? So nutrient density is just looking at how many nutrients you have per pound of food. And the nice thing is you don't really have to worry about it because the foods that are lower in calorie density, which are also known as calorie dilute, are also the foods that are highest in nutrient density. And they're the same things that I've been talking about before: the starchy vegetables, the non-starchy vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes. So you do not need to count calories if you're eating the right kinds of foods. You don't need to portion control or limit calories. You need to eat until you're full. If you are eating the right kinds of foods, you don't need to worry about any of that stuff. So how do you get started? Well, there are some things you need to worry about. So your environment, what does your home look like? The people that are surrounding you, are they supportive? And yourself. So how are you standing in the way of this? And then you want to look at how to plan and prepare, how to keep things simple, and I'll finish with some tips and tricks. So at home, you've got to get rid of the offending items. So that's meat products, dairy products, oils, eggs. Prep your pantry with the things that are going to help you make this transition. So some of the top must-haves, I think you want to have intact whole grains. So that's going to be brown rice, barley, starches, so starches such as potatoes, corn. You want to have easy to make or ready to make. So you can buy brown rice that's boil in a bag, that's very quick cook. You can also buy rice that's called quick cooking rice, things like that. The other thing you can do is cook a lot of it at once and use it for days at a time. The other thing that I found helpful is to have a lot of frozen fruits and veggies in the freezer. That way you don't have to rely on fresh all the time. Shelf-stable beans are key. And then you want to have a lot of good spices, seasonings, and dressings, the ones that are going to be oil-free and low in salt if possible. People, so you want to find your community. Find people around you who live this way so that when you are making this transition, you've got people who can support you. Now, you might start eating this way and want others to eat this way with you. really the best way to get people to change. And I can say this because I've changed my husband, my mom, my sister, a lot of people in my life, my husband, by being a role model. So you just do it. And once you start feeling great and looking great, people are going to ask you what you're doing, and they're going to want to do it too. Your environment also, with the people that you're around, if you're going to go somewhere with people, you're just going to want to maybe sometimes eat before you go so that you're not ravenous and starving and you end up making a bad decision. And you can also bring your own dishes. So when you go to a party, of course, not now with COVID, but if you go to a party, bring something that you can eat that you can share with other people, and then just stick to that dish instead of trying to eat all the other things that other people have brought. And then one of the things, this is Doug Lyle, if you're familiar with him, but he always says, just tell people, you know, I don't know, I'm just trying this out. It seems to be working for me. And then that way people aren't as judgmental, and they seem to accept it a little bit more if you just say, oh, you know, it doesn't work for everybody. It just seems to be working for me. Then you won't get as many questions from people about making that change. Now for yourself, you want to stop dieting, right? When you eat this way, you're eating the right kinds of food. You can eat, and you can eat often. You satisfy your hunger with the right food. You satisfy your hunger with the right foods. You also want to continue to do what you're doing like right now. Go to lectures, watch webinars, keep reminding yourself of the why. Why are you doing this? It helps keep you motivated. But the other thing you want to remember is that perfect is the enemy of good. It's something that Voltaire said. So I like this because you can't expect that you're always going to be perfect. So you don't want to expect perfection when you're making these changes and then completely give up when you're not perfect. So there are things that are good, better, and best, right? So maybe having something that is plant-based that is not a complete whole food is going to be better than a very oil-ridden meat food. So you're just looking at what are the types of things that I can eat most of the time, and don't get too upset with yourself if you're not perfect all the time. And then you want to also prepare in case there are lapses where you maybe eat something that you didn't want to, and then a relapse where you've completely given up. We'll go over that in just a moment. So planning and preparing. So we talked about this a little bit already, but basically you're going to want to, you know, prepare so that you've got things available so that it's very easy to eat when you are hungry. When you're starving, it's really hard to not just say, oh, let's just eat out. Let's just get something to go. So if you're making potatoes, for instance, you just make a bunch of them at once and you store them in the fridge, and then you just pull them out and heat them up. And that makes eating a lot easier. Make extra rice, barley, quinoa. You've got those shelf-stable beans. Canned diced tomatoes or something that's really great to have on hand. This meal on the right is a pozole that my mom makes. It's got tempeh, it's got rice, it's got canned tomato, beans, corn. It's very easy to throw together. You also want to have frozen veggies with you, and then have healthier snacks available at all times so that when you do have those twinges of hunger that you are able to find something quickly that'll satisfy that. And you want to keep it simple. This photo on the right is very similar to what I eat a lot. So that is, I think that's barley with just steamed broccoli. Keep it monotonous. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to use a lot of complicated recipes. In fact, the more variety you have in your diet, the more you will actually eat. So the more things you have around you. So for instance, on Thanksgiving, when we have a lot of different kinds of foods, you're going to just eat more because you want to try it all. So if you keep it really simple and monotonous, you're going to not overeat as much. We really focus on, in my family, choosing a yummy starch, a veggie, and then we have some sort of low-fat seasoning or dressing to put over the top. We make the same thing over and over. One of the things that you can do when you're talking about weight loss is preload your meal with a salad. So if you eat a salad that is 100 calories, it actually has been shown to decrease your caloric intake of your main meal after the salad by 200 calories. So it's a net negative of 100 calories just by eating a salad before your main meal. Label reading. So I can't go into this too much, but basically you want to try to keep your calories from fat to no more than 20% of the total. So when you are looking at a label, unfortunately, it doesn't say now on there any more fat from calories, but you can still do the math. So because there are 9 calories for every gram of fat, you're just going to take the grams of fat, multiply it by 9, and then you take that and divide it by the total number of calories. And then as long as that's below 20%, good. And then limiting salt. So studies have shown that you do eat more with salt on your food, about 11% more. Eating out. So some of the places that sometimes will have things that you can eat out are Thai, Vietnamese food, Japanese food, Mexican food. Steamed veggies and rice is always a go-to in my family if we eat out. If you go to a breakfast place, a lot of places have oatmeal. That's something very simple, oatmeal with fruit. You can also ask for them to make hash browns oil-free. And other things you can ask for would be soups, just making sure that it doesn't have any animal stock or oil in it. You can have salads, bring your own dressing if you're afraid that they won't have like an oil-free dressing that's good. I love California balsamic. That's one where they have a lot of different balsamics, and they've got little squeezy bottles that you can bring with you. A lot of places will just have a plain baked potato. Just make sure that they don't cook it in any oil or butter. And then the other thing you can do is if you go out, just eat before you go. And then that way, whatever you're eating, if you're just having a salad, that you're going to have enough food. The other things that you want to keep in mind, one of the things that a lot of people are doing now is intermittent fasting. And that's actually something that I think can be helpful with weight loss. So basically, you're just looking at what was natural for humans before we had food available to us all the time. And what was natural is that we would kind of shelter once it got dark outside, and we wouldn't go out and try to find food. And so a lot of times we would be fasting for a specific amount of time. And that's just not the case anymore. A lot of us are snacking late at night and things like that. So if you can give yourself a window, even if it's only 8 hours or 12 hours, that can be helpful. Then physical activity. So you want to try to get 150 minutes per week, and that's about 30 minutes, 5 days a week. This is something that's recommended by the Lifestyle Medicine, College of Lifestyle Medicine. And then sedentary behavior, just being aware of that with COVID, that a lot of us are watching a lot more TV, sitting on the couch more, not moving around as much. And just being sedentary, even if you're exercising, even if you're getting in that 150 minutes of exercise per week, still increases your mortality and morbidity. And especially if you're watching TV, they found that it even increases more by just the difference of just sitting somewhere and being sedentary versus watching TV while you're sitting. And then finally, if you're going to be eating this way, you need to have a B12 supplement. So making sure that you're getting at minimum 5 micrograms a day. Unfortunately, they do not sell vitamin B12 in that low of a dose. So what we use is actually this one that I've shown pictured, which is 500 micrograms. So I take that about every week or so. And in order to make these changes, something that some of you may have heard of is just a SMART goal. So making sure that when you're making a goal to make a change, that you're being specific about that goal, you're making that goal measurable, achievable or attainable, relevant and realistic, and then making sure that there's a time frame involved with that. So for instance, if you want to try to just get more plant foods into your diet, and beans is a great one. You got lots of nutrients, calorie dilute, and full of fiber. Fantastic. So if you want to increase the amount of beans in your diet, you could say, well, I'm going to make sure that I get 1 cup of beans every day for 2 weeks. So that is a very specific, measurable, it's got a time frame involved with it. It's something that you can do because you have beans in your pantry, and it's something that's relevant because you're trying to improve, and maybe it's not easy for you to go from your current diet to eating whole food plant-based with no oil overnight. And then finally, you need to make sure that you're planning for those lapses. So where you might eat something that you didn't want to. And then those relapses where you've said, I'm just giving up, I can't do this anymore. So a lapse is just a short term. It's actually easier to address because you haven't completely taken over and gotten back into those bad habits again. Now, a relapse is something you want to prepare for. So I would actually recommend that you sit down and think about what you would do in the case of when might a lapse occur. So is it when you're out with friends? Is it when you're starving? Who are you with? How will you notice it before it becomes a relapse? And really journaling about what are these things that could happen, so that when they do happen, because they will, all of us have difficulties and all of us lapse at certain times, knowing what you're going to do, who you're going to talk to, who you can turn to. So what you want to do is make sure that you have a good family system, family, friends, social support groups, faith groups, anyone that you can turn to help to prevent that. You can set up to where you would check in with a certain person at a certain time. So maybe every week you check in on a Friday with a certain person and they say, okay, how have you been doing? And that just helps you know that you have to check in with this person, you have to tell them how you're doing, and that'll help prevent you from relapsing. And then also just thinking about what kinds of things could you do. So maybe you have someone who eats this way. You say, okay, I'm going to go to this party where I'm going to be really tempted to eat these bad foods, but if I bring this person with me and I tell them, don't let me eat any of this, that's going to make it a little bit easier. And ultimately, at the end of the day, with all of this, I want you to be really patient with yourself. So you want to make healthy weight loss goals that are smart, like we talked about. And don't forget, perfect is the enemy of good. Being good is just fine. And make this your new way of living. This is not a diet. This is a way of living. So this is a way that I've been living for a very long time, and I love it. I am not missing out on a thing. I don't count calories. I don't worry about portions. I eat until I'm full. I eat the right kinds of food. And I really want to make this point, and we've talked about this a lot today, but that carbs are not the enemy. So many people are afraid of eating carbs, and you're so afraid that carbs are going to turn into fat. And we know this now, that your body does not like to do that. Your body does not like to turn carbohydrates into fat. It's very metabolically inefficient. So remember that carbohydrates are something that your body needs. It's found in all plant foods, and it can be your superhero power. Do not be afraid of carbohydrates. And ultimately, one of the things that I found to be the most helpful is really making sure you've got a good support system. And if that is not in your family, if it's not in your friends, you can find that community elsewhere. One of the things you can do is join us. So you can come to more events like this. Come to the Salt Lake Thrive events. Salt Lake Thrive has its own private Facebook group called the Salt Lake Thrive Group. I have a group on Facebook that's private called Eating Whole, WFPBNO, Whole Food Plant-Based No Oil for Health. I also have a workshop coming up this Saturday that is going to be more in-depth. It's going to go through how to transition to plant-based, and we're going to go through, we have a meal plan, some food demos on very simple, easy things to make, and we'll have a webinar that goes into more detail on some of these other things that I didn't have a chance to go through today. If you're interested in that, you just go to my website, drnikidavis.com, and you can just click on upcoming events and find more information about that. And then, of course, if you want to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I would love that. And I hope I haven't gone over time. I know we're getting really close to the end here, but I did want to spend a few minutes to answer any questions that anyone has. So Harriet, if you wouldn't mind helping me out with that and seeing if there's any questions maybe in the chat.
Yeah, we have had a few questions, but thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. I know you really spoke to, because I've tried a few diets along the years, and I think one thing that you said as far as being prepared to have a lapse, because I think I've had the personal experience. You take an Oreo, eat an Oreo, it's like, well, I've eaten one Oreo, I might as well eat two. Well, I've eaten two, I might as well eat four. And it's like, well, what the heck? I've just kind of like sabotage, and here I go. So I think, being prepared for that kind of lapse, and knowing that you don't have to sabotage your entire diet, what have you, and don't worry about being perfect, because I think, like you said, the perfect that can very much be the enemy of the good. And I think also the visualizations, like for oil, people just don't realize how many calories. I mean, look at the back of the bottle of olive oil, like, my goodness, 120 calories per tablespoon. So I think you did a great job of, giving the macro view and what have you, and how our body works. And I very much encourage, I've just heard so many negative things about the keto diet. So if anyone is considering that, or has a friend or family member who's considering keto, please don't do some more research on that. So we'll go through. So I know, Dr. Davis, we had somebody asks, do you take patients in the Salt Lake City area? And that was a question from Maria.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I am actually looking into starting telehealth from my home. And that's something that is likely going to be available near the end of this month or maybe early February. And I am licensed in Utah and California right now. So those will be the 2 states that I'll be available. And then I'm going to be expanding that to probably some of the other states like Montana, Arizona, and Nevada. So that will be something that'll be available. I won't be seeing people in person for now, but mostly telehealth. And then I will be doing some more workshop type things, and eventually I'll be doing some in-person retreat type live-in programs, similar to like Dr. McDougall, where people come and live in a location and eat the food and learn about it in person and do lab work and things like that, get off medications.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to when we'll be able to do some of those in-person retreats, hopefully later this year. And we had the question, it was somewhere along the way, and it's from Gina. She asks, is that why Dr. Goldhammer recommends resting while fasting? And we have Gina still with us. Gina, I can see if I can unmute Gina, or she can, you can clarify that question in the chat, Gina, because it was during Dr. Davis's presentation. Do you know what she might be referring to, Dr.?
Yeah, so yeah, at True North Health Center, they have food there. So you can go there and just eat whole food, plant-based, but they also are a water fasting, so water only fasting facility where you can go and drink only water for days at a time, up to 40 days. And that sounds crazy, but I have seen in person a lot of people regain their health by doing water only fasting. There's a lot of really good research showing that it actually can work really well. And one of the things is that, yes, when you're fasting, your body wants you to be resting. And the doctors there also want you to be resting, but it is because you don't want to be expending any extra energy, because then your body's going to have to go looking for it somewhere else in your body. And you don't want that going on. You want to just rest and let it do its thing. So yeah, absolutely.
And Gina had another question asked to explain the difference between beans and legumes. And I said legumes include things like chickpeas, peanuts,
Yes.
peas, and lentils. Dr. Davis, I don't know if you have.
So yeah, legumes includes beans. So a bean is a legume, but it also includes things like peas.
Thank you for that clarification. For Michael, we had a question. Is there any protection or distinction between oils, butter, and ghee?
Oils, butter, and what?
And ghee, G-H-E-E, I believe.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, they're all very high fat products. At the end of the day, very high in fat.
All right, and let's see. And so Rami asked, what about sugars, coconut sugar or nectar? Is there any difference as far as weight loss between different kinds of sugars, such as nectar, coconut sugar, or maple syrup?
You know, I would say, you know, most sugars are going to act about the same. For our house, we try not to use a lot of extra sugar. Really, we stick to more like maple syrup. But it is going to be, you know, it's going to rise, you know, it's going to be a big glucose load in your system. It's not something that's super natural that you want to be using a lot.
Oh, okay.
But using it on occasion, if it's something that helps you maintain this way of eating, I think is okay, as long as you're not depending on that all the time. It can have some inflammatory effects.
Okay, we had a couple of questions related to B12. What about 1,000, 2,500 micrograms? Should they be taken once a week? And then also, do you recommend multi-tablets or drops?
I think that tablets or drops are just fine. For the most part, any type of B12 that you're going to take is going to work fine. I think that if you're taking it weekly, so the lowest dose that I've been able to find is 500 micrograms. And so that's why I just take it once per week, because you really don't need more than that. And so I would say that if it were me, I would just go with 500 micrograms weekly. 1,000 is okay. Your body is actually really good at just peeing out what it doesn't use. So it might be a little bit of a waste of money if that costs more. So that's why if you just use the lowest dose, your body's going to take what it needs and get rid of the rest. So.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Someone asked, Michael asked, are you going to work with plant-based telehealth.com or Dr. Clapper on your own?
So I am looking at 2 different telehealth options right now. So one of them is with plant-based telehealth with Dr. Clapper. And then the other one would be doing kind of my own thing. It's through the Plantrition website. And so I'm kind of looking at both of those to see which one I'm going to go with.
Okay. And someone is asking, Lisa's asking, what would be your recommendation for patients with diabetes? That's a good question because it's an issue a lot of folks are struggling with who are interested in starting a plant-based diet.
Yep. So that actually might be a great topic for another day because there is so much great data that shows that this way of eating can not only prevent, but actually can in some cases reverse diabetes for people. So absolutely, I would recommend this diet for anyone who has diabetes, even if it's type 1 diabetes, which is that your pancreas does not produce insulin, but especially type 2 diabetes, and especially people who haven't had diabetes for very long, it is absolutely reversible. And eating this way, you don't have to worry about starches being a problem. You don't have to worry about carbs being a problem. There is so much research out there that shows that eating this way is beneficial for diabetes, and you don't have to worry about the amount of carbs or the amount of starches. For people who are diabetic, it will actually help them cure their disease.
And back to sweeteners, do you recommend dates and or pure maple syrup for add to food for sweetened while cooking for sweeteners?
So yeah, so I would say that the best thing would be dates because it is a whole food. You know, they're high in sugar content, but it isn't like a pure sugar form. So one of the people that I had mentioned earlier, Kathy Fisher, that has the Straight Up Food Cookbook, she uses a lot of dates in kind of some of the sweet things that she makes. So for New Year's, we made her lemon poppy seed cake, and my son just annihilated it. He's 7 and he loved it. But it's all sweetened with dates and that's it. So no other extra sugars. So I think dates is a great option.
Yeah, they're great as a snack and as a sweetener. And another question about sweeteners, what about monk fruit?
You know, I haven't used monk fruit.
Monk fruit, okay.
Yeah, I haven't used that. So maybe I'll have to look into that a little bit more. But I have heard of it, so.
And Jean is wondering, what do you think of the Ayurveda medicine diet? Do you have any experience or thoughts on that?
What is it called?
Ayurveda, A-U-R-V-E-D-A.
Haven't heard of that.
Okay.
No, can't speak to it. I apologize.
All right.
Something I'm gonna look up tonight though.
It's traditionally from India. It uses a lot of herbs and it's mostly plant-based, but they end up using ghee, which is supposedly supposed to have medicinal qualities, but maybe that was 2,000 years ago. That does not apply to today.
Well, and ghee, if I remember right, isn't it like the fat
clarified butter?
What's that?
Clarified butter. That's what it is.
Okay, I thought it was like fat that was surrounding kidneys in a certain animal or something. Maybe that's something
No,
else.
this is just you take clarified butter and then you cook it and then you make the ghee out of it. So it's still a lot of fat, basically.
Yes. And just imagine the sludging of the arteries. And we watched that video earlier.
Thinking about
some of that. That's one of those, that video I actually watched for the first time when I worked with Dr. McDougall. And it's one of those that I think you should watch every so often. And when you're about to have a fatty meal, just remember that that's what your arteries are going to be going through when you're eating that kind of food. And so it stops me.
I have a cousin that follows the Ayurvedic diet and put on ghee 3 meals a day, 3 times a day. And 2 weeks ago, she got a stroke. So
lesson learned. So yeah. And so I have not heard of AMIA powder. Kathy's wondering, what do you think of AMIA, A-M-I-A powder for blood sugar is being promoted heavily by an author. That's a new one for me.
Is it amla? Amla?
It could be.
Yeah,
Um,
amla is what is promoted, yes.
Okay.
So, you know, I'm going to kind of go back to what I know, which is that whole foods in their pure form are what our body was designed to eat. And as long as you stick to that, you are going to live your healthiest life. So going and buying these, you don't need supplements. Besides B12, you don't need supplements. You need some sunshine, you need water, you need B12, and you need healthy whole foods. So all these supplements that people are trying to sell, you go to the naturopaths and they've got all these supplements up on the wall. You don't need all that stuff. That's just money down the toilet, literally. So any of that extra stuff that people are selling, no, I don't think that that's stuff that you need.
Okay, and we have one more question. Do you have any thoughts on, well, jackfruit and honey? Maybe you've already addressed honey, but jackfruit's a little bit, and honey too. And then
Jackfruit is fantastic. So jackfruit is a fruit, and it's one that can either be eaten just as a fruit. You can, it's delicious, it's sweet, or you can marinate it for a very long time, and it ends up looking like a pulled pork almost. And I don't know, because I don't think I've ever actually eaten pulled pork, but that's what I've been told. And so that's a great option. It's a whole food, and it's something that can be made a lot of different ways. So that's fantastic. Honey, it's a sweetener. I don't personally recommend it, but I also started out as a vegan. So I'm plant-based, I'm whole food plant-based, but I'm also a vegan at heart, and I don't believe in using any animal products. So that's not something that I would recommend.
And our last question tonight comes from Michael. What about zinc and magnesium as far as supplements in addition to B12?
Yeah, I don't recommend it, honestly. I think, you know, if you're in the hospital and you are deficient in magnesium for some reason, like you've been drinking a lot of alcohol, then yes, you should get a little bit of magnesium to overcome that. But if you're just looking at using a supplement because you're worried about getting a cold, or making sure that you get enough of that, our bodies are able to thrive when we eat a varied plant food diet, and you don't need to take extra supplements. So I wouldn't recommend it.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Davis. And I think everyone can see why we're always so happy when Dr. Davis agrees to do an event with us. And we're talking about doing something later in March, kind of like a fitness and health and fitness event. And that's the time when people start thinking about getting outside and being outdoors and being a little bit more active. So we're working on the dates and the details for that. And also, once again, Salt Lake Thrive has our next event is on Tuesday, February 9th. We're going to have a fun cooking demo, romantic dinner, a Valentine's dinner, how to prepare that, and hopefully another heart health related event there February. So Salt Lake Thrive. So I know everybody doesn't do Facebook. So if you want to get on our email list for upcoming events, that's just saltlakethrive@gmail.com. And I'll put all this information. We'll send the recording out to the link to the recording out with a follow-up email, but saltlakethrive@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook, just facebook.com/Salt Lake Thrive. And so once again, thank you very much, Dr. Davis, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And I know we all got a lot of great information, and hope to see you at our next event on February 9th. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Dr. Davis.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate y'all being here.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you for joining us.
I can't leave.